Good morning, everyone. For the first time, I'm not talking about my vaccines. So, a slight change in what they suggested to me. It's a difficult topic, but I think all of us during the pandemic became vaccinologists or probably virologists. And what I realized when I was making these vaccines, obviously your family, your near and dear ones, they keep on interacting with you. And some people who were commerce graduates or maybe housewives, they were coming and asking me for phase 3 trials. Have they been successful? What happened in the animal tox studies? So one thing I realized that all of us became virologists. So Manoj, you or me who started believing that we were virologists. Okay. What I have done is that I have tried to make a session which should be interactive. I'm like hot and Maggi tomato sauce. I'm always different. So each time when I come on the stage, I want to have something different, So this time I have decided that I'll give a few prizes to people sponsored by OmniVRX let us understand what people thought was the biggest challenge during the pandemic for industries. Anybody who would like to answer that? What was the biggest challenge which the industry faced as soon as the pandemic arrived and we had to mass produce? Anybody can answer that question? Vaccine capacity. Excellent, sir. One prize for you. I think somebody can come and give it over. Supply chain management. Excellent, sir. Second. Safety and potency was a tough thing. Anyway, you can take that prize. Yeah, that's almost on the last stage. Manpower arrangement, that goes with the capacity. Mindset was again the last because I'm still waiting. Availability of raw material, I think you deserve 2. Political pressure. Political pressure could be one of the answers, but it's a political answer. Yes, sir. Which platform to use? Again, a very scientific answer. Yes, a speedy approach. That was one challenge. Obviously, that was a challenge to the DCGI. That was not a challenge to the manufacturer. When the product will be in the market was a public question. That was not the difficulty. Managing over expectation from the public. Again, a public question, sir. Clinical trial, obviously, everybody understood that clinical trial was a question, and I think the drug controller did a good job that he didn't allow 10 years to pass by, Otherwise, all of us would not have been here, sitting here.
Authorities, and he had mentioned a very valid point during this phase that I do not know the answer because the federal regulators, the federal US House of Members are pressurizing me to tell me when I can produce mass vaccination. I do not have an answer for it. This is Patrick Tipu writing to the World Vaccine Manufacturing Federation members.
I wish he would have come to Serum Institute. We would have told him, yes, go ahead right away.
Absolutely, sir. Dr. Altaf, if you know, is the global innovation head for Sun Pharma. He had actually sent a note to Sachin, and we wanted to personally meet with you to take that forward.
Good, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Stress to the manufacturers. We were very happy that, we can mass produce and earn a lot of money. So I don't think we were stressed. Stressed while we were manufacturing. I think, yeah. Sir, another one, sir. You can take it straight away, sir. Thank you. So I'll just tell you, thanks for the answer. But I'll tell you the biggest challenge was inventory control. That was the biggest challenge during manufacturing. Because we were completely unprepared. We had no answer how much inventory we should keep, how to keep it, where do we have the warehouse to keep such an inventory, and whether this pandemic will really continue or whether it will subside by the time, like people were saying, by March it will be over, when it came in February. So there was a huge challenge to all the industries. Thank you for the answer. I'll just go ahead with my presentation. Please, can somebody start it? Yeah. So how do I go ahead? Where? Yeah. So these are my recent publications. I just have added these slides for my disposable bioreactors. For clinical manufacturing, I'm using OmniBRX bioreactors. And then my recent publication on the new purified Virocell rabies vaccine, development of the Viro-based rabies vaccine, Rabivax-S at Serum Institute. I would never miss the opportunity for something which I struggled for 12 years. So this is what I had done in the last couple of years. Now what happened during the pandemic? So as all of you know that pandemic, I'll just tell you a brief history. Very quickly we'll go through that. Examples are we had cholera, bacteria, influenza viruses, and coronaviruses. So what is a pandemic? The WHO defined pandemic as a worldwide spread of a new disease. During pandemic, transmission happens between person to person. The pandemic is a typical epidemic that has to spread at least in 3 countries within the WHO region. That's what a pandemic is all about. So we had the various pandemics from 1855 to 2019. We had China bubonic plague in 1855 to 2019. We had COVID-19. In between, we had swine flu, we had SARS, we had Spanish flu. Though Spanish flu was considered to be the biggest pandemic before COVID-19. Then the various pandemics which have happened, bubonics, septicemic pandemic, and pneumonic plague. Then the 6th cholera pandemic which happened over the years. These are the various pictures we have gathered thanks to my team on the various pandemics which have happened. And the swine flu pandemic, which I said was the biggest pandemic which happened. And finding the support of hypothesis that the pandemic virus contains genes derived from avian-like influenza virus strains, and then the 1918 virus is a common ancestor and human of classical swine flu H1N1 influenza virus. So this is the various pictures of the swine flu pandemic. Then we had the SARS. So SARS is caused by the coronavirus called SARS-associated coronavirus, SARS-CoV. And SARS usually begins with flu-like signs and symptoms. You would have already realized that even today, if you look at the general public, a lot of people, a lot of children are suffering from flu. You get flu, and then you get acute respiratory syndrome today. So be careful, this is still continuing. Then the swine flu pandemic for Serum Institute made Nasovac S. A lot of my colleagues are here who together we made Novavax S vaccine. Then the various stories on COVID-19 pandemic. So the COVID-19 pandemic was caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2. The outbreak was identified in Wuhan. The virus is primarily spread between people-to-people contact. First case came to in India in Kerala state in January 2020. Many COVID vaccines were under development to protect, I mean, this must be an old slide. Some antiviral drugs under the development to protect against pandemic COVID-19. Experimental drugs showed promising results in small groups. The results were encouraging, far from prone to experimental drug effectiveness taking the new coronavirus. So this is how we have illustrated various pictures on the COVID pandemic. And now the human coronavirus. Coronavirus have positive sense, single-stranded RNA viruses, there are 7 types, etc. We had MERS, outbreak of COVID-19 is another wake-up call for biomedical society. I always feel that the viruses are coming. They are still coming. As the climate change is happening, the globe is warming up. A lot of viruses which are sitting in the Arctic and the Antarctic ice under the ice, they'll surely come up and show in the near future. Now, these are the various coronavirus strains. I'll just come back to slide on vaccines. This is a vaccine which we made. Vaccines are proteins, polysaccharides, pathogenic nucleics, and used in stimulate immunity to eliminate weak pathogens, pathogenic products. In other words, vaccines are biologicals prepared to acquire immunity. Vaccines are prophylactic and therapeutic. Administration of vaccines is called vaccination. Vaccination is the most effective and preventive method of infectious diseases. Now, routes of attenuated vaccines which we make, injectables, orals, nasal. We have measles, mumps, rubella, dengue, varicella we don't make, but it is an example of live attenuated vaccines. Live attenuated vaccines which are oral and nasal, OPV, influenza, which Serum Institute makes. Then we have inactivated vaccines which are rabies and IPV, which I make. Then vaccine development processes which we have gone through. This is not related to the topic of today, but since I make it, obviously it will be in my slides. Then we have COVID-19 vaccine, which was Covishield, which we prepared. R&D strategies, choice of vaccine development, market research, and competitors. This is what we initially decided to look at. So vaccine development, you know, we do R&D, GMP facilities, academic with GLP facilities, selection of strain and host cells, line, selection of process, and the selection of process for development. This is how, once we think of making a vaccine, these are the various steps which all industries do. Process in development, host cell line adaptation, applicability of downstreaming, stabilization excipients, stability, and process yields. Phases in the vaccine development, you've seen, first we do exploration, then preclinical, clinical development, regulatory review, approvals, manufacturing, and quality control. Challenges in COVID-19 manufacturing. So this is where we start the topic. So first important aspect was that we had to look at raw material inventory planning. So each time when there is a huge requirement, what is most important is to look at the raw material inventory planning. We do not know, no anticipation of normalization during COVID-19 waves. Many countries had restricted the supply of various materials. That was a very important aspect, that there was a lot of embargo. As soon as countries like US realized that these are the various requirements of raw material for India, for example, Covishield, so they put an embargo and we were denied that particular raw material. We had to really request the countries to release the raw material. Logistics was heavily affected. That is, you know, that even supply chain was affected, but logistics was also affected. Excessive inventory in some items because of the shortage. So what happened is, we had no idea that how much of inventory we need to control. So what we did is, we bought some huge lot of material, and then we realized that that was really not that requirement. So our warehouses, everything were dumped with a lot of material. And fortunately, for companies like Serum Institute, which are quite cash rich, we were able to sustain. But imagine a small industry keeping such huge material and which is not consumed. Then production demand not defined. That was one of a very important aspect. We had no idea what is going to be the amount of production which is required. Now defining stock was a challenge. Sudden demand of vaccine may lead to shortage of raw material, which was obviously, again, the raw material became important. Lead time vary from raw material to raw material. So what has happened is, whenever we were asking the suppliers that we want this particular raw material, many suppliers whom I don't want to name as such, even today tell us, sir, please put your raw material demand. Remember that in the industry. They will tell you, please put your demand in the raw material, in the demand to us, because we may be able to supply you in 24 months. So if you don't have that raw material today, you are going to get it in 24 months. So obviously we started as Serum Institute looking for a lot of indigenous manufacturers of raw material, because a lot of international MNCs were telling us that if you put the demand today, we will be able to supply the raw material in 24 to 32 months. Even today they tell us the same thing. Now, the production challenges. For increasing the production capacity requires facility and skilled manpower. Now, when we had this making of Covishield, it had a small complex procedure of making. So where do we get so much of skilled manpower to have such huge mass production? And we had no idea that once the pandemic goes away, what we do with that huge manpower which we have already recruited. So this also became a huge challenge. Now equipment which is already existing at Serum Institute and equipment required and updation of that equipment. Because if you have to supply to US, if you have to supply to other countries, then you require a 21 CFR compliant equipment, you require this, you require that. So all such things had also to be taken care of. Production time, process time, which had to be minimized, because we cannot continue to take long times to produce. Production requirement of dose was also undefined. That was another aspect. Quality control was a very, very important aspect, because you can produce, but how to test the vaccine to see whether it is efficacious, whether it is potent. So time testing had to be reduced. Availability of sufficient reference standard. Now where do we get the reference standard? That also became a very important aspect. Testing kits availability was also a challenge. So if we knew that we had to look for DNA, we had to test the DNA content in it, we had to add some testing kit, then availability also, testing kits were important. Shortening of time of discovery of the COVID-19 vaccine. Different vaccine platforms were being used for vaccine development, each one presenting several advantages and several disadvantages. We have already talked about messenger RNA, DNA vaccines, spike protein vaccines, various vaccines. According to WHO, on January 5, 2021, there were 63 candidate vaccine in human trials and more than 172 candidates in preclinical development worldwide. So that is where I was coming to, that see, you can imagine that in spite of so many candidates available, we were approached by a few 30, 40 people in India itself. They said that they had the right vaccine. Covishield was granted emergency use authorization by the Central Drug Standard Control Organization in India in February 26, 2021. You can imagine how much time it took. Now, clinical trial development. Limited understanding of SARS-CoV-2 virus, biology and pathophysiology. There were numerous social, practical and logistics challenges during the development. Epidemiological shifts in disease burden across the globe as complicated clinical trials. As the genetic sequence of SARS-CoV-2 was published on January 2020, triggers intense global R&D activity to develop a vaccine against the disease. So now we already know there are so many strains. Initially we thought if these strains keep on changing, whether we will ever come up with a vaccine. Fortunately, we have understood that there are strains, but there are different strains, but a lot of vaccines work fortunately against all those strains. The 2 COVID-19 vaccine candidates entered human clinical trials with unprecedented rapidly in 2020. Prior to COVID-19, the time between vaccine development start and product licensure marketing typically spanned between 10 to 15 years. So much time would take for a typical vaccine to develop. Now, regulatory approvals. Emergency or expedited approval systems were already in place at the time of this pandemic. The FDA also cited the possibility of less conventional approach. One approach would allow accelerated approval of vaccine based only on antibody levels or another biochemical markers rather than actual clinical outcome. The FDA had established a well-developed science-based approach to vaccine approval and surveillance. It had rigorously presented sensible plans for evaluating the COVID-19 candidate products. The success story was that on 25th January 2021, Government of India started supply Serum Institute produced doses. Covishield has been granted emergency license, as you know, and the individuals is 18 years of age and older, including those over 65, in January 2021. Indian vaccine production and delivery capability to help all the human fight COVID pandemics. Supplies under grant assistance to Bhutan, Maldives, Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar, Seychelles have begun from 20 January 2021 on the mission Vaccine Maitri. Novavax and Serum Institute of India announced World Health Organization grant emergency use of NVX-CoV2373 COVID-19 vaccine in 17 December 2021. Now these are the various photographs we have on success story on Atmanirbhar Bharat, cheapest COVID-19 vaccine in world. Mr. Adar Poonawala, then the Covishield, and Sajjan Singh Yadav's Indian vaccines story from Cowbox to Vaccine Mantri. Now, Covishield, as we all know, is CHAD OX1 and COVID-19 vaccine being developed by Jenner Institute and Oxford Vaccine Group, the University of Oxford, and manufactured by Serum Institute of India. This is a chimpanzee adenovirus vector vaccine developed at Oxford Jenner Institute. Koyuvac vaccine is made through a partnership with Novavax and Serum Institute. This vaccine consists of SARS-CoV-2 RS recombinant spike protein nanoparticle with matrix M. Vaccine requires 2 doses and is stable at 2 to 8 degrees. I'll just tell you a small story. Novavax acquired a company called as Isconova. This was the company which made matrix M adjuvant. And I did this work in 2009 and 10 with Isconova using matrix M with rabies, and we did a clinical trial in Europe. But unfortunately, the company called as Isconova was taken over by Novavax, and we never got the data. Otherwise, I would have had a vaccine of rabies in Europe. So these are the various stories which keep on happening. Then we have Koyuvac nasal vaccine. This is the intranasal COVID-19 vaccine, which has multiple advantages. The Serum Institute of India is scaling up the manufacturing of corona vaccine to ensure availability to meet critical public health needs. This is a Codagenix technology, allows rapid generation of multiple vaccine candidates against emerging viruses. Codagenix has a very beautiful technology of reverse engineering. I think I'm making this vaccine. I've made some vaccine for clinical trial right now. And I think the technology with Codagenix uses is a beautiful technology where the virus doesn't multiply at such a stage that you get the disease, but the body recognizes and gets immunity. It's a very beautiful technology. I think they should use it for all other viruses as well. The upcoming vaccines at Serum Institute, we have dengue vaccine, we have HPV, and chikungunya vaccine. Again, we have, this is a very initial project. We have hepatitis A, we have Japanese encephalitis. These are the various things, pipeline projects. Thank you very much. Any questions, sir? I think most of the questions were answered by the audience itself. Yeah, there is a study which is done against the other variants, and Covishield does work very well against them. I think that now the Koyuvac vaccine produced by, in collaboration with Novavax, we have done a lot of study, and we have found that the scientists at Novavax, we had a recent get-together with Novavax where the scientist published the data, and he said that most of the strains have the same protein present, which is very well working for the Novavax vaccine. So I believe today, instead of the Covishield, the once jab, Novavax is a better vaccine for all variants.
So, you want me to stand up? That was a very clear challenge which you mentioned, that you build up capacity, definitely because the demand was so high in the initial phase. Now suddenly suppose there is a dip. Now what do you do with those capacities? Because they can be used only for defined categories of vaccines. It is not that it's a tablet facility. So
No.
if paracetamol doesn't work, maybe you can go with some other things. What do you do with those facilities?
Obviously, that's a very difficult question we are struggling to answer. Obviously, Serum Institute has a lot of vaccines which we manufacture. We manufacture around 55 different kinds of vaccines. And therefore, Mr. Banga. Mike, please. Wow, great.
So when we generated the capacity, we already repurposed one of our facilities. And one of the trademark secrets or our strategy was single use. So it was much easier to repurpose the facility. So there is very little cleaning and other things required to do this. So the capacity can be converted for other products.
Yeah, and probably that is what we are supposed to do. So we have a lot of facilities which are single use, Mr. Banga? Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we converted at least 3 facilities into COVID facilities. We had the equipment, they were meant for other products, but our philosophy was single use, and that worked.
Good, thank you, sir. Thank you for answering this question.
Sir, my name is Nikhilesh.
Yeah, he wants to answer. Uday wants to say something. Yes.
Just I have one question.
Oh, you have the question. I thought you were answering my question. I was very happy.
What's the Serum's thought particularly on the mRNA vaccine, on the DNA vaccine?
It's difficult. I have no answer to such questions. Sorry, Uday. You have to ask Mr. Banga himself. He may be able to answer that. Yeah.
Yes, sir, my name is Nikhilesh. I am into the analytical testing. Thank you for the wonderful talk. My question is Serum planning on developing any kind of vaccine patches?
Patches?
Yeah, because nowadays I think there's a lot of demand for vaccine patches to overcome any kind of pandemic, because I think you can make patches and you can have a drug delivery system in a very, very effective way. So is there any plans in future, or is this something?
There are, because Mr. Banga, I think we did one. Yeah.
And we checked their facility. But if you ask, is anything under the works? The answer today is no. But it is on the radar.
Yeah, we did. I think we did one.
Yes.
Yeah, because I had got one patch. So, manufactured at Serum Institute.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Ashish, for your talk. It was very insightful. My question is more towards the analytical testing of these vaccines. Now, you said that most of the vaccines do offer protection against the virus, so which probably means that you might have a lot of similar analytical tools spread over these commercial vaccines, and you would also be needing standards for them. So do you see a common standard which can be applied to all of these vaccines?
A common standard would be very difficult, because they are specific. So I don't think a common standard would work. People have developed specific kits for different strains, different messenger RNA, DNA, spike proteins. They have made different kits, But those kits are obviously working for the variants. That is true. The variants of the different strains which are coming, those kits are, yes, they are definitely working for them.
So my question is more towards the compendial standards. Say, for example, we have identity testing which can be applied to all the commercial formats. So do you see a possibility of these standards coming in from the compendial side?
People should work on it. I mean, that's what I can say. I mean, we have been talking and discussing that the Indian companies should work on developing a standards and come up with a standard and say, yeah, wow, I have one, and approach Serum Institute and then say, okay, we have a standard which works on various variants. And then probably we may be able to use them, because we did do that. We did, yeah.
Existing products, I mean, your idea is worthwhile trying, but then it's the compendial agencies who have to set the standards, and the availability can be made from us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
To do something, because it's a very populated country, there's a lot of brains and vaccine leaders like yourself. On one hand, the world needs innovation. On the other hand, the vaccine leaders like yourselves ask, do you have regulatory approvals? When people are dying and people do not have the access to vaccines, how do we ensure vaccine leaders like yourselves, or you yourself, ensure that innovation really comes to you, because you have the power, you have the voice, you have to make things happen. So a small company, though it has innovation, though it has brains, how do they move forward?
I think they should approach the management of Serum Institute and, and get their work shown to them. And then Serum can approach the drug controller. Obviously, Serum will have a clout since a lot of vaccines at Serum, manufactured at Serum, have been approved, and none of them have ever been rejected. So innovators should approach Serum Institute and show their work, what they have done, and then Serum Institute can take it forward.
By all means, sir, I just have one request. Make the process more easier.
Make the process?
Make the process of approaching vaccine leaders like yourself more easier for small innovators.
Now I'll tell you about that. I'm not boasting, but during COVID-19 pandemic, believe me, 100 people approached me from worldwide that we have the technology, we have the COVID vaccine. 100 people approached me only. So you can imagine that Mr. Bhaga may throw light that we as employees at Serum Institute, he being the head of regulatory at one time, and I being a production head present, have we ever met at Serum Institute? So Serum Institute is such a huge place. We meet at conferences. Can you imagine that?
I met him only 2 times or 3 times in Serum.
So it is such a huge place. So you cannot expect things to happen very fast. But obviously regulations have taken a very serious thought, and we believe that you can get very fast track approvals now from the drug controller. We have a very positive approach. Yeah. Sure. Thank you very much, everyone. There's one left. So there's one left. If anybody has any answer or just puts a hand up, I can give that. Yeah, the one who asked, that's for me. Thank you very much.